The bravest thing I did after my wife died was survive the first year. The second bravest thing was buying 2 plane tickets to San Francisco and deciding, for the first time since the world caved in on me, that my son deserved a father who was actually present, not just standing in the same room with his eyes somewhere else. My name is Victor Bell. I'm 44 years old. I live in Denver, Colorado, and for 3 years I have been a widower, a single dad, a man who keeps his grief folded up like a letter he's read. So many times the creases have gone soft. I run a mid-sized residential construction firm out of Englewood, Bell & Associates, which I built from the ground up over 15 years. I am not the kind of man who cries in the shower, or reads self-help books, or talks to a therapist about his feelings. Or rather, I wasn't. Then my wife died, and I became all three. Her name was Nora Bell, née Hartwell. She was 40 years old when she died, and she was, by every external measure, a wonderful woman. Smart, methodical, put together in a way I always admired and sometimes resented. She had the kind of mind that could run 3 spreadsheets simultaneously in her head while holding a conversation about something else entirely. She handled the financial side of my business for 8 years before she transitioned out to run her own consulting firm, Hartwell Financial Strategies, out of a small office on South Broadway in Denver. We had a son, Eli Bell. He was 8 years old on the day everything ended. He is 11 now, and he is, without any competition, the best thing I have ever done. The accident happened on October 14, 2021, a cold Wednesday morning. Nora had gone kayaking on the South Platte River with her business partner, Martin Morrow. The stretch they were on runs through Jefferson County, west of Denver. Not the most forgiving water in late fall, but not extreme either. They were experienced, or Nora was. According to Martin, the current pulled her kayak sideways near a rock shelf. She capsized. The water took her. He tried to reach her. The current was faster than it looked. That's what Martin Morrow told the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office, word for word. I know, because I read his statement 3 times. Search and rescue spent 4 days on that river. They found her kayak wedged downstream against a log jam near the Chatfield State Park boundary. They found 1 paddle. They found her personal flotation device, her PFD, snagged on a route 800 yards downstream. They never found Nora. Jefferson County issued a death certificate based on the evidence. It took 11 days. I remember holding that piece of paper and thinking it was the cruelest document I had ever seen. A sheet of bureaucratic language that reduced my wife to a case number and a date. I buried an empty urn in Fairmount Cemetery on a gray November morning. Eli held my hand the entire time and didn't cry, which was somehow worse than if he had. I cried later, in the truck, alone, for a long time. The life insurance policy paid out in January 2022. $2.1 million. I didn't want it. I sat in the office of my attorney, Dennis Blake, a man I've known for 20 years who has a poker face like granite, and told him I felt like I was being paid to forget her. He didn't argue. He just helped me manage the paperwork, because that's what you do. You keep moving. You cash the check. You try not to feel like a transaction. I put the majority of it in trust for Eli, kept enough to pay down the house, gave a portion to a nonprofit that does river safety advocacy in Colorado. It felt like the right thing to do. And I kept moving. For 3 years, I kept moving. Eli started middle school at Grant Beacon Middle on South Emerson last fall. He made the soccer team. He discovered he was good at math. He started asking me questions about his mom with a frequency that started gentle and became insistent. The way a tide works, always just a little further up the shore than you expected. I answered everything I could. I protected him from the weight of the worst parts. That's what dads do. The idea for the San Francisco trip came from Eli himself. We were eating breakfast on a Saturday morning in February 2025, the kind of Colorado February where the sky is so blue it seems fake, and he looked up from his cereal. Can we go somewhere? Just us? Somewhere that doesn't have anything that reminds us of her? I didn't answer right away. I looked at my 11-year-old son, who had just said something more emotionally precise than most adults manage in a full therapy session. This kid is going to be okay. He's going to be better than okay. Where do you want to go? San Francisco. Immediate. like he'd been sitting on the answer for weeks. I want to see the Golden Gate Bridge and Alcatraz and eat real sourdough bread, not the stuff from Safeway. I laughed. First real laugh in a while. I booked the tickets that evening. United Airlines Flight 1728, departing Denver International Airport at 7:55 a.m. on Wednesday, March 12, 2025. Arriving at San Francisco International Airport at 9:42 a.m. local time. 4 nights at the Marriott Marquis on Mission Street in Union Square. I planned the whole trip like a project, which is what I do when I love something. I build it carefully until it's solid. March 12th came in cold and clear. Eli was up before his alarm, which had never once happened in his 11 years of life. At 5:30 a.m. he was at the breakfast table in his hoodie, backpack already strapped on, eating toast, absolutely vibrating. "You know we don't board until 7:20, I told him. "I know." Chewing. Unbothered. "So why are you dressed?" "Because I didn't want to be late." As if this were obvious. I love this kid so much it actually hurts sometimes. We drove to Den in the dark, parked in the economy lot on Pena Boulevard, took the shuttle to the terminal. Everything was unremarkable and easy. Denver International runs a clean operation. Concourse B, Gate B42. No delays posted. The plane was a Boeing 737-800, which I only know because Eli read the tail number and immediately informed me of the aircraft type with the confidence of someone who has watched too many aviation channels on YouTube. We boarded and found our seats, 14A and 14B, window and middle. I let Eli have the window. He pressed his face against the glass during pushback like he was 6 again. There it is. There's the kid underneath all that middle school composure. The flight was routine. We'd been airborne about 40 minutes, somewhere over Nevada, when Eli went quiet. Not the quiet of sleep. The quiet of someone who has seen something and is deciding whether they're right about it. I was halfway through an article on my phone when his hand closed around my forearm. Tight. "Dad." Barely above a whisper. "Row 26. Don't look fast. Look slow." The hair on the back of my neck stood up completely. I lowered my phone, tilted my head, slow and casual, the way you look when you're trying to seem like you're not looking. Row 26 was ahead of us and across the aisle. 2 passengers, a woman at the window and a man on the aisle. The man I didn't recognize. Heavy set, late 40s, expensive jacket, the air of someone who travels for work and has long since stopped finding it interesting. He had headphones on and a laptop open. The woman had her face turned toward the window, short dark hair, not the color I remembered. Nora had always been blonde. Different haircut, lighter build, a charcoal gray sweater, sleeves pushed to the elbows. I started to dismiss it. "It's not her, Eli, it can't be." And then she laughed. It was nothing. The man beside her had apparently said something and she turned slightly and laughed. Quiet, contained, a quick exhale of amusement. But the sound, that sound, Nora used to laugh like that, like she was trying to keep it small and it kept escaping anyway. Eli had apparently inherited whatever part of the brain catalogs sound permanently because he'd heard it too. That was why his hand was around my arm hard enough to leave a mark. "Dad." Still steady, more frightening than if his voice had broken. "That's Mom." "Eli, I know what you're going to say. You're going to say I'm imagining it. That I want it to be her so badly my brain is filling in the gaps." He kept his eyes forward. "Her left wrist. Look at her left wrist. She has the scar from when she fell in the kitchen when I was 4. Diagonal mark, about an inch, just below the wrist bone. I remember it." I couldn't breathe. I looked again. The woman's left arm rested on the window ledge. From our angle, row 14. Looking back and across, I could just make out a mark on the inside of her left forearm. Small. Linear. My heart stopped doing whatever normal hearts do. No. No. They found her kayak. They found her paddle. They never found a body. I set my phone face down on the tray table. Very carefully. I looked at my son. 11 years old. The sharpest human being I had ever met. "Stay in your seat." "Dad, stay in your seat, Eli." "I mean it." I stood slowly, the way you do on a plane when you're trying not to disturb anyone, and moved into the aisle. I walked forward toward the lavatories, which put me directly alongside row 26. I stopped and half-turned the way you might if you were checking the overhead bin. She was right there. Her profile, the line of her jaw, the angle of her nose, the way she held her shoulders. Thinner than I remembered. The dark hair should have been enough to make me doubt myself. But the jawline. The way she rested her fingertips against her temple when she was thinking. Nora. She felt me looking. I don't know how. People always know. But she felt it. She turned. 2 seconds. That's how long we looked at each other. Her face did something I will never be able to fully describe. Not surprise. Something on the other side of surprise. Absolute, cellular dread. Like a person who has built a house of cards in a room with no wind. And a door suddenly opens. Then she looked away. Back toward the window. Deliberate. Slow. Like she was controlling every muscle she had. Martin, the man I would later confirm was sitting beside her, had his head tipped back against the headrest, dead asleep, earbuds still in. He had no idea any of this was happening, which was, I would later realize, the only mercy in that entire moment. My legs carried me to the lavatory. I locked the door. I ran cold water over my hands and looked at myself in the mirror of that United 737 somewhere over Nevada. And I had a conversation with myself that I am not going to repeat here. Because some things are too private even for this channel. What I will tell you is what I decided at 35,000 feet. I was not going to do anything. Not on this plane, not with my son watching. But I was also not going to let that woman walk out of San Francisco International Airport without knowing that I had seen her. I didn't know then what the next 5 days would cost her. I didn't know the full shape of what she and Martin had built. But I knew one thing with complete certainty. Whatever was about to happen next, it was going to be on my terms, not hers. Welcome back to Sweet Family Revenge. Grab your snacks, get comfortable, and remember, the people in these stories had every chance to behave themselves. They just chose wrong. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. You're going to love it here. Eli knew. The moment I walked back to row 14 and sat down, he read my face and stopped asking questions. He just looked at me with those steady brown eyes and waited. I leaned close. I need you to do exactly what I tell you for the rest of this flight. No arguments until we land. Can you do that? One nod. Act normal. Look out the window. Eat your pretzels. Don't look at row 26 again. Okay. A beat. She's alive, isn't she? I had no idea how to answer that. I don't know anything yet. I don't know anything until we land. He accepted that, turned to the window, ate his pretzels. I spent the remaining hour and 40 minutes of that flight keeping my face neutral for Eli's sake, while running through 3 years of memory with every other available piece of my brain, looking for what I must have missed. The business. Hartwell Financial Strategies. I had assumed it dissolved when Nora died. Her associate, a woman named Kelly Forsyth, had sent a condolence card and then quietly wound things down. But had I ever confirmed that? Had I actually followed the money? No. I was a grieving husband trying to get his son through 2nd grade. The insurance company had done their investigation, standard for a claim that size, and cleared the payout in January 2022. 8 months after the accident. Somebody believed she was dead. Somebody reviewed that claim carefully and signed off. Martin Morrow. The man who watched her go under and came back without her. The man currently sitting in seat 26C, 20 feet ahead of me, wearing an expensive jacket and earbuds, apparently unaware that the husband of the woman he helped bury was studying the back of his skull. I was certain of it now. I'd met Martin Morrow 4 or 5 times over the years. Company dinners, holiday parties, big man, easy laugh. Always had a hand on somebody's shoulder. I hadn't recognized him immediately because I'd never had any reason to look closely at Martin Morrow. He was just the business partner, the harmless background noise business partner. Nothing is harmless. We landed at SFO at 9:38 a.m. 4 minutes early. I let the plane empty methodically. I watched Martin and Nora stand, retrieve their bags from overhead, and move toward the front. Nora walked with her eyes straight ahead, never glancing back, Martin put a hand briefly on her lower back as they reached the jetway. My jaw tightened so hard I felt it in my temples. I got Eli up, told him to stay close, and we followed at a natural distance through Terminal 3 into the main check-in hall. I watched them claim luggage from Carousel 4 and move toward the rideshare exit on the departures level. I pulled out my phone and called Dennis Blake. Just past noon in Denver, he'd be at his office on East 17th Avenue. Second ring. Victor, what's wrong? Not a question. Dennis has known me 20 years. He knows I don't call midday without a reason. I need your voice completely level when I tell you this. A pause. All right. I just got off a plane at SFO. My son spotted Nora on the flight. She's alive, Dennis. She's here. Complete silence. The kind that has weight to it. Dennis. I'm here. Completely controlled. Tell me everything. I told him. The laugh. The scar. The 2 seconds of eye contact in the aisle. Martin Morrow in 26C. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Victor, if this is what you think it is, you cannot confront her without a plan. You go to her and she runs. Both of them run, and you lose everything. 2 people who committed federal insurance fraud do not get caught twice. Federal insurance fraud. 3 words that hadn't fully assembled themselves in my brain until that moment. They landed now with the weight of a structural beam. What do? You go to your hotel, you give Eli a normal day, you do not approach either of them. Text me the moment you have a hotel name, an address, anything. And Victor, do not call the police yet. Let me make some calls first. Okay, you're sure it was her? I was married to that woman for 14 years. I know her laugh. I know the way she holds her face when she's scared. All right, I believe you. Go check in. Let me work. Eli was standing beside me with his carry-on, watching my face. I put my phone away. We're going to the hotel. Then we're going to Alcatraz, like we planned. He studied me. You called Dennis Blake? Yes. Is this a legal problem? Possibly a very big one. But that's mine to handle. Today, you get the bay. He thought about this. Then, okay, but you have to tell me everything when it's done. Everything, I agreed. The Marriott Marquis on Mission Street put us on the 14th floor with a view of the downtown skyline. Eli dropped his bag, walked to the window, and spent 4 minutes in complete silence taking in the city below. Then he turned around with something approaching his normal energy. Can we get sourdough before Alcatraz? That's my boy. We went to Boudin Bakery on the wharf. We took the 12:30 p.m. ferry to Alcatraz Island. Eli walked the cell house with the audio tour and came out with that particular expression he gets when he's absorbing something significant, quiet and internal, like a banked fire. We ate clam chowder in bread bowls at Pier 39 as the sun dropped toward the bay. We watched the sea lions on K-Dock bicker and pile over each other, and Eli laughed, the first real laugh I'd heard from him all day. Dennis texted at 4:47 p.m. Contacted a PI I use in San Francisco, Bobby Tony, former FBI. He's on it. Stand by. At 6:15 p.m., found them. Hotel Zephyr on Fisherman's Wharf, rooms 318 and 322, booked under Martin Morrow's name. Tony photographed check-in. Victor, she looks exactly like your wife. Tony says if you're wrong convincingly. I read that text standing in the hallway outside our room while Eli showered. I had to press my hand flat against the wall for a moment. She was 12 blocks from where we ate lunch. The next morning, Thursday, March 13th, I got Eli set up with a self-guided tour of the California Academy of Sciences in Golden Gate Park, arranged through the hotel concierge. He understood without me saying it directly that I needed the morning alone. At 9 a.m., Bobby Tony met me at a coffee shop on Columbus Avenue in North Beach. He was exactly what you'd imagine from a former FBI agent doing private work in San Francisco. Fit, precise, comfortable with silence. He had a folder on the table when I arrived. Surveillance photographs from the previous evening. Nora and Martin walking along the wharf. Seated at a restaurant. The restaurant's exterior lighting was sharp. There was no version of those photographs in which that was not my wife. The rooms are booked through Sunday, Tony said. They arrived 3 days before you. They've been in San Francisco since the 9th. Before that, The trail leads to Scottsdale, Arizona. He has a rental property there under a corporate LLC. She's been living there for approximately 2 years. Phoenix Metro. Flat. Scottsdale. Northeast side near the McCormick Ranch area. I looked at the photographs. What do I do with this? Depends what you want. If you want them arrested, FBI field office is at 450 Golden Gate Avenue. Insurance fraud of this magnitude is federal. 18 U.S.C. Section 1343, wire fraud. The payout alone triggers felony exposure for both of them. If you want to talk to her first, that's your call, but I'd advise against it without counsel. I thought about Eli in the rainforest exhibit at the Academy of Sciences, probably looking up at the canopy right now with his hands in his pockets and his brain going 100 miles an hour. Set up a meeting. Here's exactly what I want you to do. The note was delivered to room 318 at the Hotel Zephyr at 11:15 a.m. on Thursday, March 13th. Tony had an assistant carry it in a plain envelope, hand it to the front desk, and walk out without a word. Inside was a single index card. In my handwriting, I know you're in 318. I know about Scottsdale. I know about Martin. Meet me tonight, 8 p.m., Fog Harbor Fish House, Pier 39. Patio, come alone. If you don't show, I go to the FBI field office on Golden Gate Avenue at 8:01. Victor. I spent that day with Eli. We walked to the Painted Ladies on Steiner Street and stood in Alamo Square Park while Eli photographed the Victorian row houses against the skyline. We rode the cable car up Powell Street and he gripped the running board rail with both hands, grinning into the fog like a kid in a movie. We had lunch at a Vietnamese place on Larkin Street in the Tenderloin that Dennis had recommended from a previous trip. Good broth, better spring rolls. The city was beautiful and indifferent to my internal disaster, which was exactly what I needed it to be. At 7:30 p.m., I told Eli I had a meeting. He looked at me. Is this it? Yes. He sat on the edge of the hotel bed, quiet for a moment. Dad, whatever she says, I just want you to know that you didn't do anything wrong. Whatever she says tonight, that's true. I stood there for a long moment. 44 years old, and my 11-year-old son was offering me grace I didn't know I needed. I know, I finally said. I'll be back by 10. Fog Harbor Fish House sits on the north end of Pier 39, extending over the San Francisco Bay. At 8 p.m. in March, the patio is cold. The bay stretches out dark and enormous behind you. Sausalito and Tiburon lit across the water. It is not a place that encourages dishonesty. I was at a corner table when she arrived. She came alone. Dark green coat I didn't recognize. Belted, nothing like anything she'd owned in Denver. She stopped 3 feet from the table and looked at me the way someone looks at something they know is going to change their life permanently. Victor. Sit down, Nora. She sat. Didn't take off her coat. Folded her hands on the table and kept them still. A habit I remembered, something she did when she was keeping herself from shaking. I let the silence do its work for a moment. I'm not here to yell at you, I finally said. I don't think yelling would be sufficient for what you did, honestly. I'm here because my son is 12 blocks away in a hotel room, and he deserves a full accounting of why he spent 3 years thinking his mother was dead. Her face moved. Something cracked behind the composure. Eli, don't. Quiet. Level. Don't say his name yet. You don't get to say his name yet. She pressed her lips together, nodded. Tell me everything. Start from when the idea started, not when you executed it. When you first thought of it? She exhaled slowly, and she told me the business was failing. That part was true. Hartwell Financial Strategies had taken on a significant client in early 2020, a Denver area real estate developer named Powell, who turned out to be financing property acquisitions through methods that didn't survive regulatory scrutiny. Nora and Martin had managed his accounts. When Powell's operation collapsed under a federal securities investigation in mid-2020, it dragged her firm's reputation into the debris. Clients pulled out. Revenue collapsed. By January 2021, Hartwell Financial was carrying $400,000 in debt with no viable path forward. Why didn't you tell me? Because you'd built everything. Her voice dropped to barely above a murmur. You built Bell & Associates from nothing. I watched you do it for 15 years. And I had taken an equal partnership in our life and burned my half down in 18 months because I took on the wrong client. I couldn't. She stopped. I couldn't look you in the face and tell you that. So instead you looked me in the face and let me bury an empty urn in November. Nothing to say to that. She didn't try. Martin Morrow had engineered the insurance scheme. The policy was already in place. A $2.1 million joint life policy they'd taken out years earlier. Martin had contacts who could manufacture a convincing accident. She was deliberately vague about who. I let it go for the moment. The South Platte River stretch was chosen carefully. Late October water temperature, remote enough that body recovery would be unlikely. They planted the kayak, the paddle, the PFD. Martin rehearsed his witness statement until he could deliver it without variation. They had planned it for 4 months. 4 months, while she was making dinner, helping Eli with homework, and asking me how the Littleton project was going. The money, where did it go? Half went to pay the firm's debts. The other half, split between us, operating costs, the move to Arizona. And Martin, he bought the property in Scottsdale. We are not, Victor, we are not together. Not the way you're thinking. He is a business partner. That's all he's ever been. I don't care. I genuinely, completely do not care about that part. She went quiet. Here's what I care about. My son cried himself to sleep for 11 months straight. I know, because his room is next to mine, and old houses don't keep secrets. I sat outside his door in the hallway on the worst nights, on a folding chair, because I couldn't hear it from my own room without needing to do something. And there was nothing to do. He asked me once if maybe Mom wasn't really gone, if maybe she was just somewhere she couldn't get back from. And I told him no. I told him she was gone and wasn't coming back, and we had to love each other extra hard because that's what she would have wanted. I watched that go through her like a current. He was right. He was right. And I told him he was wrong. I need you to understand that there is no version of this conversation where you don't carry that for the rest of your life. I know, she whispered. Now, here's what happens next. She looked up. I met yesterday morning with Bobby Toney, former FBI special agent, currently the most thorough private investigator I've ever encountered. He has surveillance photographs, a paper trail from your firm's debt to the policy payout, communication records between you and Martin from the planning period, and documentation of your Scottsdale residence. He has already shared a preliminary package with Dennis Blake in Denver. Her folded hands went white. This morning, I continued, Dennis contacted Agent Joan Blackman at the FBI's Denver field office. Agent Blackman handles financial crimes. She is currently reviewing the full package. Victor, I'm not finished. I kept my voice conversational, steady. I think that was more unnerving than raised would have been. Federal insurance fraud under 18 U.S.C. Section 1343 carries up to 20 years per count. Conspiracy charges are additional. Martin Morrow organized this scheme. He has the deeper criminal exposure. These are determinations Agent Blackman will make. She was very still. What I have done, and this is the part where you need to listen carefully, is speak to Agent Blackman about cooperation. I have told her that you have information about Martin Morrow's network of contacts, the people who helped manufacture the accident evidence. I have told her you may be willing to provide that information in exchange for a cooperation agreement. The bay was black and enormous behind her. You want me to cooperate. I want Martin Morrow to face the full weight of what he built. He designed this. He recruited you when you were desperate and ashamed and not thinking clearly. He has done this before. Toney found 2 prior incidents in other states. Different partners, different schemes. Agent Blackman is very interested in Martin Morrow's prior history. And me? That is between you and the federal government. I am not your lawyer. I am not your protector. But I will tell you this. Cooperation is your best option, and you have approximately 48 hours before Blackman's investigation makes that option irrelevant. She looked out at the bay for a long moment. When she looked back, her eyes were wet. Can I see Eli? I had expected this question. I had thought about little Eli since Toney handed me those photographs. Once. Tomorrow morning. A public place. With me present. I will not lie to him about what you are. He already knows something is wrong, and he is too sharp and too old to be managed with comfortable half-truths. You will tell him, in whatever words you choose, that you are alive and that you left, and that it was wrong. You don't have to give him legal details, but you will not perform grief or manipulate his emotions to make yourself feel better. You will be honest. That is the condition. She nodded. Her jaw was trembling. And after that, you are going to call Agent Blackman's number, which Dennis will send to your phone tonight, and you are going to begin a conversation that determines the rest of your life. But that is your business. My business was sitting at this table. I stood. I set $40 on the table for the coffee I'd ordered and never touched. I'm going back to my son. I walked off that pier into the cold San Francisco air. I did not look back. Not once. The meeting with Eli happened the next morning, Friday, March 14th, at a cafe on the Embarcadero, called The Hub, just south of the ferry building. Eli wore his Denver Broncos hoodie and ordered a hot chocolate. He sat across from his mother, who looked like a person who had not slept, and he waited. She told him she'd been alive, that she'd made a terrible mistake and left, that she'd been wrong. She didn't cry. I think she understood that her tears were not the priority in that room. Eli listened the way he listens to everything, with his whole face, absorbing, sorting. When she finished, he was quiet. Then, I thought I was imagining things. For years, I used to think I heard you sometimes and then feel crazy. You weren't imagining things. No, Eli said. I wasn't. A long moment passed between them. I don't know how I feel about you. I don't know if I'm supposed to be happy or angry or what. You're allowed to feel whatever you feel. I know. He looked at me then. That's what my dad taught me. What passed between us in that look I will keep to myself for the rest of my life. Nora Bell cooperated with federal investigators. She contacted Agent Joan Blackman that Friday afternoon and entered into a cooperation agreement. Over the following 6 weeks, she provided detailed testimony about Martin Morrow's network, contacts across 2 additional states, a prior staged accident in Nevada, financial channels running through 3 shell companies. The scope of what Martin had built turned out to be significantly larger than a single life insurance scheme in Colorado. Martin Morrow was arrested at his Scottsdale property on April 3, 2025, by agents from the FBI's Phoenix field office. He was charged with wire fraud, mail fraud, conspiracy to commit insurance fraud, and obstruction of justice. The indictment was 41 pages. His attorney entered a not guilty plea in federal court in Phoenix. Now, let me tell you about the part that never made it to a courtroom. 3 days after Martin's arrest, Bobby Toney, still on retainer, confirmed something he had discovered during his initial investigation, but held back until the federal case was secure. Martin Morrow had a second insurance policy. Not on Nora. On me. A $2.5 million accidental death policy, taken out on Victor Bell through a shell company Martin had registered in Nevada in November 2021, 1 month after Nora's staged accident. The beneficiary was listed as a trust that ultimately ran back to Martin himself. I was the next phase of the plan. The idea, as federal investigators later reconstructed it, was this. Nora would eventually die again, a second accident this time abroad, somewhere with less scrutiny. I would then remarry, and the second Mrs. Bell would be a woman Martin controlled. Over time, the marital assets, including the insurance trust I had set up for Eli, would be maneuvered toward Martin's network. I was not merely the grieving husband in this scheme. I was the next target. Martin Morrow had looked at my life, my business, and my son, and seen a long-term acquisition. Agent Blackman added conspiracy to commit murder, 18 U.S.C. Section 1117, to the indictment in May 2025. When Dennis told me, I sat in his office on East 17th Avenue and didn't say anything for a full 2 minutes. Then, does Nora know about the policy on me? Dennis paused. Federal prosecutors believe she did not, and you believe her cooperation has been thorough enough that if she'd known, they would have found it. I thought about that for a long time. Nora Bell's cooperation agreement remained in place. She pled guilty to a single count of insurance fraud in May 2025. 3 years probation, full restitution of her share of the payout, 200 hours of community service. The insurance carrier recovered the full $2.1 million payout. Dennis negotiated with the carrier to treat the portion I had placed in trust for Eli as an offset against restitution rather than an additional recovery claim. It was a complicated negotiation. Dennis earned every cent. Martin Morrow went to trial in federal court in Phoenix in October 2025. The jury deliberated for 6 hours, guilty on all counts. Sentencing in December 2025. 22 years in federal prison. No possibility of parole for the first 15. On the day the sentence was handed down, I was driving Eli to soccer practice at Washington Park in Denver. He had his cleats in his lap and his window cracked even though it was cold, because he always wanted air in the car. My phone buzzed with a text from Dennis. 22 years. Done. I put the phone face down in the cup holder. Good news? Eli asked. Very good news. He nodded, satisfied, and looked back out the window. He didn't ask for details. He didn't need them. He already knew what he needed to know. That the man who had helped take his mother away and had apparently planned something far worse for the rest of us was not going to be in a position to hurt anyone for a very long time. That's enough for an 11-year-old. More than enough for a father. We flew home from San Francisco on Sunday, March 16th. Eli bought sourdough bread from the airport terminal, and we ate it on the plane like we had no table manners at all, which was his idea and which I fully endorsed. He fell asleep for the last hour of the flight. I sat beside him in 14A and watched him sleep in the window seat where he'd first grabbed my arm and said those 4 words, Dad. Row 26. Look slow, and I thought about what it means to trust a child's instinct when every responsible adult impulse tells you to say, that's not possible, honey. Let it go. He was right. He was right when I was about to tell him he was wrong. And that rightness had unraveled a 3-year deception, put a predator in federal prison, and given Eli something I could never have planned for him. Not the family he lost, but the truth about it, which, in the long run, is the only foundation anything real can be built on. We landed at Denver International at 2:14 p.m. I carried our bags. Eli carried the remaining sourdough in a paper bag under his arm like it was something valuable. Which, to be fair, it was. We went home. I didn't look back on the way out of the terminal. I haven't looked back since. If you like this story, join our community by hitting that like button and subscribing for more family-centered accounts like this.